Dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. Elevator music. Dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. Dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. And all right, my spiritual babies. We are back again for episode number 4 of Psychohistory. And today we're focusing on a particularly odious clown by the name of Karl Marx. Ugh. Particularly in a great book, the second best book on Marx. I'm going to get a passage from this, The Devil and Karl Marx by Paul Kenger, genius. The best book, of course, is by Richard Wurmberg. The great, he should be a saint. I'm going to call him a saint, I don't care. He's a saint, Richard Wurmberg. And the third best is the one by Paul Johnson. But Karl Marx, psychohistory. What do we mean by psychohistory? Well, we take the individual evils and broken psychology, and we use psychology to examine the individual broken person who starts a movement, and to see if there's any themes that reflect on the movement at large, and then resonate on the adherents who then follow it. And the idea is we're not going full Harry Sheldon here, because we're not using it to be too predictive. Well, I guess we are using it to be predictive, but we're not predicting all of mankind's fate yet. That would probably be in Cleometrics if I can ever get there. But for psychohistory, we're focusing on the individual faults and flaws of the psyche of the particular soul, the sin, if you were, that translate onto the movement at large and then onto the adherents. So in this case, they would be Karl Marx's evils. Thou shalt not steal. That's translated on the movement at large of communism, which is just a fraud. It's just a cover, a conspiracy to steal. A conspiracy front to steal, to have an excuse to steal in the name of equality. Of equity, and then the individual adherents to that today, Bernie Sanders and AOC, little commie bastards whose whole goal is to steal somebody else's labor. And we'll see if this works. Is obviously the answer of that is going to be yes. But starting with the history of the little she-devil Karl Marx. Marxism, Marx has said, religion is the opiate of the people, in disdaining religion. And he's famously is labeled as like an atheist, but he wasn't an atheist. He was the exact opposite. Well, he was. Atheism is as much as theism is a belief in God. Atheism is a belief in not God. So they are the same in that way. And for that, he's exactly appropriate to be called an atheist, in the real sense of the word, not in the current understanding of atheism is believing you don't believe in God. No. He, of course, believed in God because he hated God. He believed in the devil, and he was a devil worshiper. To know Karl Marx, you have to start with that. That he saw himself as a poet, and his first great play was he took it's an anagram of Emmanuel, which is to go with God, and in it the hero, so-called hero, there are no redeemable characters in this. The hero is wants to envision nothing but destruction on mankind. You never find out why, but all it is violence on mankind, which was his goal. He first and foremost saw himself as a poet dedicated to Satan. So he believed in God to rail against God. Now, the personal history of Karl Marx. Karl Marx was a lazy. He did achieve a PhD of some nature at a young age. So he's an arrogant intellectual. Oh, as I was saying, so they said the eighth. So he would say the religion is the opiate of the people. Well, what we now know is that Marxism is the opiate of moron intellectuals, and it seems to be perfectly cast to ensnare arrogant intellectuals who think they're so much smarter than everybody else and happen to be lazy. That's who he was as a young man, and never changed. He never worked a day in his life. He lived off of not one, not two, but three trust funds. He lived off his father's the trust fund first by his father. Then second, he exhausted his wife's trust fund, and then thirdly, of course, he lived off Engels, his partner's trust fund. He never worked a day in his life. He was famously remarked by his mother, if Karl worried a little bit about his own capital, he wouldn't have to worry about everybody else's capital so much. Meaning that even his mother was upset that he was a no good layabout, never worked a day in his life. Now, ethnically, he was a born Jew, but he rejected Judaism. And he rejected being ethnically Jewish, and that's key. We'll get to that in a second. I'm going to add one little thing that nobody else has talked about, but then you can understand the complete barren logic of Marxism. Now, I've been told my entire life about what a genius Marx was, and for people, so-called fake intellectuals, only a fake intellectual would call Karl Marx a genius, because they just haven't read any of his drivel. If you've read it like I have, and you've forced yourself through this nonsense, you realize how batshit crazy it is. It's all about the destruction of everything, from the family. The Communist Manifesto was about the destruction of the family, not so-called economics. But it's yet put up again and again and again as somehow it's a valid criticism of economic systems and industrialism, and it's not. Of course, if you look at the actual statistics on GDP, on growth of GDP from that time period, yes, it was some Dixonian problems. Yes, there was some badness in it. Yes, there were little kids who put their fingers in factories and lost their hands. And yes, there had to be a whole labor movement to fix all that stuff. However, statistically, without a doubt, from whatever you count, the beginning of the industrial age, and there's some argument about whether it happened actually in England or whether it was on the farm in America, whatever. From when you count it, there was an unstopping, straight hockey stick, if you would, up of GDP that lifted mankind out of abject poverty. In the beginning, 95% of the world's population was in poverty. By 2020, 95% of the population was out of poverty, and only 5% in poverty, all thanks to free markets. All of it thanks to free markets. What kind of economic drivel that it is that Marx had some kind of critique of capitalism. It wasn't. I'm going to get that in a second. Anyway, back to Marx. So Marx rejects his Jewish ethnicity. He becomes a PhD early, marries, never does a day of work in his life, is arrogant, is completely arrogant, and feels entitled, and outraged that other people get ahead because they actually work and he doesn't. He's an out-and-out racist. Not only that, he's an out-and-out anti-Semite. The theory that he comes up with, the Marxism, has noted characteristics to it. Number one is the zombie Christianity, the emptiness. of this. Oh, look, we're just doing this all for our brothers. They all deserve equality. And sure enough, that was the whole, the whole Jesus is the whole thing. As Paul points out, we're no longer Jew or Greek. We are no longer Gentile. We're no longer male or female. We are now all brothers and sisters in Christ our Lord. Kumbaya, all brotherhood, except that it's never a kumbaya, all brotherhood with the communists. That's just the excuse. It's always the elites, the aristocrats, the aristocreeps, now called the Politburo, who then decide, gather all the resources, keeps it for themselves, and decide who gets what and what makes it equal. But the communism he espouses, he prophesies that the German working class would rise up and join with the Italian working class and join with the English working class and throw off their overlords, and that just did not happen. As a matter of fact, it was the exact opposite. The German working class rose up and fought World War I against the Italian working class, and the English and the Italian working classes rose up and fought against the German working class. So his predictions in communism were all wrong, all proven wrong. It would take Benito Mussolini to come along and a communist and to redo communism to fascism to actually make it work, which is a national communism. Him and Hitler. Anyway, back to Karl Marx. There's as Ken Gore points out in his book, and it's a great lineup, which we're not going to steal for psychohistory as we reinvigorate the historiography of the field. Aristotle had noted that oh man, I need my glasses. Men start revolutionary changes for reasons connected with their private lives. Good old Aristotle, back in ancient Greece, had noted that about revolutionaries back then. And sure enough, if there's anybody who exemplifies that, it would be Karl Marx. His whole goal being, of course, to bring on hell on earth. Now, when I say he was an anti-Semite, rejecting his Jewish ethnic heritage and going 180 degrees in the opposite direction, that is the psychic break of Karl Marx. That is the sin that leads to sloth and to stealing from thy neighbor. It becomes his so-called economic theory that fails, Economics 101. But deeper than that is this sin of murder thy neighbor, of killing, of murdering, of hatred towards thy neighbor, right? And he was such an anti-Semite, he actually wrote a book on the Jewish question, an essay. It was actually an essay on the Jewish question, and it was written in the fall of 1843 and published in 1844 in the journal Deutsche Frankenes Jahrbucher on the Jewish question. And in it, he marks, what is the worldly cult of the Jew? Asked Marx. On the Jewish question, his answer, haggling. What is the worldly god? Money. Very well. Emancipation from the haggling and money, and thus from practical and real Judaism would be the self-emancipation of our age. And that is the key to Marxism and communism that's missed. If you think about those words, haggling and the money, this money, there's a worldly god. Think about it for a second. Accumulation of capital, right? And the bourgeois needs to be put down. They need to be criticized, right? All right. And you just heard from his own words his anti-Semitism. Transpose those words. So it's the haggling and the of the Jew and the money, for the obsession of the money, for the international cult, for the god of money, And you get it. You get the connection. You get that bourgeois really meant Jew, and you get that capital accumulation really meant haggling Jew. And you understand that his so-called economic theory had nothing to do with economics. All it was warmed over anti-Semitism. Now directed against a large segment of the bourgeois, which was of course made up of Jews. But all he was doing was taking his anti-Semitism and making it in a form that people glommed onto, these fake intellectuals, as, oh, that's intellectualism. And it shows you something wrong in their own in their own souls, in their own hearts, in their own psyches, that this resonates on. There is no economic genius behind Marxism, all right? He was a anti-Semite, lazy bum. And one of the things I keep hearing about how smart he was, because he got his PhD, one of the things you might not know is that, of course, he was covered in boils. And why was this intellectual paragon covered in boils, including on his boils on his penis and his little pee-pee? On his little tiny pee-pee? The reason why is because he would never take a bath. So why do I have to hear again and again and again that he's such an intellectual genius for this idiot who was too stupid to take a bath? Okay, so the idea that you're some kind of promoting some kind of intellectualism, or you're some kind of a genius, you're not. All you're doing is rationalizing your anti-Semitism. That's all communism is. It's a rationalization of anti-Semitism from the very beginning. And that is the evil sin that, along with sloth, stealing from thy neighbor, that are the flaws in the psyche of Karl Marx, that then get writ large on communism as large, and then resonates on the adherents. There has to be something mentally wrong with you to go out and be a communist, like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and AOC. Now, for Bernie Sanders, of course, he rejects his Judaism. He's just like that. You get a lot of these Jewish rejects who are ethnically Jewish but reject the religion of their fathers, and then have this 180-degree anti-Semitism affect them as their way of life. For Elizabeth Warren, talk about a lazy sloth and liar who never built anything in her entire life. She slept with slept. I think her husband, her second. She was a failed school teacher, slept with a professor. Like, I don't want to say cheated with the professor, so I'm not going to say that. But slept with the professor at a college, who got her a job as a college professor, who then she pretended to be a woman of color. She's the whitest white Indian you ever seen. She's whiter than a Frosty the Snowman in the middle of a blizzard holding a vanilla ice cream cone. She is pretending to be somebody, while some poor black law woman, there are black law lawyers, doesn't get the job because this so-called woman of color, Frosty the Snowman's aunt, steals the job for 20 years. It's like, well, she didn't build that. No, she didn't build that. And she's envious. And just like good old Bernie Sanders, whose rhetoric went from, we have to take the money away from the billionaires and the millionaires, to, we have to take all the money away from the billionaires because he became a millionaire with 3 or 4 homes. A complete fraud. All communism was this zombie Christianity over with an overlay of pure anti-Semitism. That's all it is. Now, for AOC, who's not an anti-Semite as far as I can tell, just a lazy sloth, greedy for other people's money. Remember, she famously said Donald Trump tried to kill my aunt by turning on the George Bush hurricane machine, and with the hurricane machine on, she was down in Puerto Rico, and a hurricane nearly killed my grandmother, and he's not taking care of her. He wants all the people in Puerto Rico to die. Well, you creep, you're making $180,000 a year, AOC. Why don't you go save your own goddamn grandmother's ass, all right? Enough. Why do we all have to do it? Turn in your freaking $70,000 Tesla, jerk. But it's this greedy avarice, this need to steal other people's labor, this sin, this lazy sin of somebody who never worked a day in his life, that becomes that marks the revolution, the communist revolution, and communism, and then resonates in the soul and psyche of these losers like Bernie Sanders, AOC, and Elizabeth Warren, and that they become the communism. Psychohistory actually has a heck of an insight. I'm beginning to love it more and more as I delve through it. As an explanatory history, school of history. Still prefer Cleometrics, but we'll get to that hopefully. And Karl Marx is the poster boy for the sins of the intellectual father of the movement being transposed upon the dunderhead children. So, as he was an atheist and wanted to destroy the world, he did a pretty good job. But we'll have to give it to another saint, the great Bishop Sheen, who noted that Karl Marx tried to destroy the belief in God. He didn't do that. Communism didn't do that successfully, but it did. It did successfully prove the existence of the devil and evil. And this nitwit is roasting in hell now, because he let his flaws overwhelm him. He let his sin overwhelm him. So be a hero, don't be a zero. Be a smarty, don't join the commie party. All right, my spiritual babies. And with that, episode 4 of Psychohistory 4 is out. God bless.